Welcome to the Nerd Party.
It's Great Shot Kid, the podcast on the Nerd Party Network that looks at the technical, inspirational, and artistic side of filmmaking. I'm John.
And I'm Mike.
And we are coming to you this week with a very special episode. I know that last week we said we were going to be talking about me seeing Get Out, but as a special birthday gift to my lovely co-host, instead I watched a movie that he's been after me for literally years to watch, The Replacement Killers, starring Chow Yun-Fat and Mira Sorvino, and Jürgen Prochnow, and Michael Rooker. But
and Til Schweiger.
Yes, that's true. That's true. I mean, it has really, in my opinion, an all-star cast.
And
Huh?
That kid.
Yes.
Hey, Dad, I'm making a shake.
As a father, I can tell you that was not a natural conversation that one has with children.
Listen to this.
Yeah. No, that's, yeah. But, usual diatribe. We're on the Nerd Party Network, nerdparty.com/contact if you want to reach out to us. Go on Twitter at Join Nerd Party. You can go ahead and reach us on Facebook at facebook.com/The Nerd Party or on Instagram at The Nerd Party. And just be sure to use the hashtag #GreatShotKid. Let us know your thoughts. But there's going to be a little bit of a switch up here because you've been after me for quite some time about seeing The Replacement Killers because you kind of couldn't believe that I made it through the 90s without seeing it. Because I've always been an action movie fan. I was a Mira Sorvino fan. All of these things seem to line up. I'm a Michael Rooker fan. Like, Michael Rooker is like a secret sauce type of thing. You say Michael Rooker's in a movie, and I'm instantly more interested in seeing it. But as I watched it, and as another mention, Antoine Fuqua, who's one of my favorite directors out there right now, I'm uncertain now, having seen it, why you wanted me to see it.
Well, for one thing, let's just keep in mind that we're coming up on the 20th anniversary.
Okay.
Which is February 6th. So, yes.
Yes.
I wanted to mark the occasion because I love this movie. And, I mean, okay, so I was a senior in high school when this came out. This came out, right after Titanic. Titanic was in December. This movie came out in February, and it was like one of those things where like that there's that period of time where everyone was Titanic, and the month of January is always crappy. And as someone who is like starving for content, starving for new things, and having just been given Titanic and Jackie Brown and Tomorrow Never Dies and all those things, I wanted more, and there was nothing else out there because it was the dark times. It was the winter. Nothing ever gets released in the winter, and this movie was coming out. There were all these trailers. There were all these people at school who were like, oh, Chow Yun-Fat's amazing. He's in all these John Woo movies. And how now he's coming to America. This is his first American movie. John Woo's a producer, and this movie's going to be cool. And I was not at all sold on this thing, not at all. I mean, I was like, it looks cool, but and I remember the commercials and the trailers and everything. So like directed by Antoine Fuqua, and I was like, who's that? Because this is his very first movie. But I was intrigued by the fact that they would actually like name check him in the advertising, which is very rare. And I'm like, basically out of boredom, on the Sunday after it came out, I went to the Lake Theater, and they had it showing in theater number 2, and I'm just like, I'm just going to watch it, because why not? I literally have nothing else to do aside from homework, and I'm definitely not going to be doing that. So I sat
Stay in
there.
school, kids.
So I sat there, and I watched it, and I was completely blown away by this movie. And it was sort of like what I had been looking for a long time, this sort of like action to the point of abstraction where like the plot is very, very simple and you can kind of like graft these amazing set pieces onto it, and everything was just about being super cool, looking super stylized and everything, and it was lean and mean and just cool. Just like the epitome of cool. And I'm like, okay, this Antoine Fuqua guy, he's something. I'm going to follow his career with great interest. And like at that point, all he had done was like, well, he was known for like the Gangster's Paradise video for Coolio, right? And then he did an Usher concert film, which I didn't see because I had to buy it for $20 at Coconuts. And I was a fan, but like that big of a fan, I don't know.
Yeah, I got to be. Yeah, you got to be like next level fan to buy the concert film. Like
right.
I think there's only one or maybe two bands where I've even watched concert films of theirs, and one of them was The Doors, and the other was Rolling Stones.
Yeah, I mean, there's some good one, like Gimme Shelter for Rolling Stones. It's like, okay, but there's like a lot more going on in that documentary than just the Rolling Stones performing.
Yes,
you know
very
what I mean?
true, very true.
So it's like, okay, yeah, that's fair, and that's cool and everything, but like this, nah, maybe not. Maybe I'm not that in love with Antoine Fuqua. The only other thing that he did, which I didn't see for years, was an episode of this sort of like, well, I guess it's kind of like the Playboy Channel's version of the Twilight Zone called Inside Out.
I had no idea that they had such a... I mean, I knew of the channel, but I didn't know that they had this show.
It's crazy. Like, you look at the people who worked on that show now. I mean, there's like numerous Oscar winners who worked on that show. Antoine Fuqua was there. Alexander Payne, the guy who did, Election in Nebraska and everything. He did a few things. Sam Raimi worked on the show, and he was already known. And some music video directors who were fairly prominent, like the guy who did like all of Britney Spears' early music videos was on it.
So have they ever released that?
Yeah, they
really?
released them. Well, originally they were on tape, but I at one point I had them on Laserdisc, and now I actually do have the DVD sitting over there.
That's fascinating.
Like, Fuqua's segment, it's not very good. It's kind of just sort of like your straight up kind of, I mean, it's only like 20 minutes long or something like that, and it's basically sort of like a micro, like typical sort of like, erotic thriller and sort of like the Paul Verhoeven sense,
So wait a minute. Was this series like a saucy series, or was this a series that by today's standards would be on Showtime or something like that?
It's like, it's nothing that, like, there's probably a lot worse stuff in almost every episode of Game of Thrones, but like everything was definitely sort of like, sexualized. There was always that element to it where, but some of the, like the Sam Raimi one, from what I remember, it was like, and he didn't direct it. He like photographed one, and Ted Raimi is in it, which is like, okay, yeah, sure. Why not?
That's kind of mind bending, but okay.
It's like, I mean, like the Alexander Payne ones, there's like one which was done in one shot, and it's really sort of like playing with the idea of like, oh yeah, this is supposed to be like really erotic, but it's like so over the top goofy that it's by no means supposed to be titillating. It's supposed to be basically making fun of that, and everything. And I mean, some of them are really well done, and some of them are absolute garbage.
In terms of the acting talent that they drew on, did they go to outside casting agencies, or were they, casting from the home base, so to speak?
It's what you would kind of expect to see in like a Cinemax movie.
Gotcha.
I mean, some of the scenes, some of the sequences probably had more talented. Ted Raimi, okay, but like the acting in Fuqua's sequence, it's a little, it feels very soap opera-y, like that's basically kind of like the level that I would say it's at.
Shot on tape, I'm guessing.
No, it was shot on film.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Okay, that's actually kind of surprising.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. No. It's a pretty high quality production, And I mean, it's worth checking out just for like the novelty of it, more than anything. Just, I mean, like with Fuqua, it's like, well, this is where he got his start. Like, this is the first time, as far as I can tell, that he was doing some sort of like narrative filmmaking, because he did music videos. Yes, he's developing his visuals, concert films, he's, doing whatever he's doing. But here, it's like he's telling a story, and it's not a very good story. But you can see kind of like, I mean, if anything, like you can see like the photography is pretty decent and everything, given, sort of what he had to work with. But it's
now,
weird.
See, I'm glad you mentioned the photography, because one of the things I caught with Replacement Killers was, is this a function of the transfer? Because while I was watching it, I was less than impressed with what it looked like. I mean, it looked like early. It did, like there were certain parts which looked like they were shot on like high quality video or something like that. Like they did not come. The lighting did not come across well in, I'd say, about half of the film.
I don't know. I think the video transfer is really, really bad. I'm sure it's the same video transfer that they made in 1998 or whatever it is. Because, yeah, I mean, you could definitely see like a lot of like almost analog artifacts. It was almost like there was some fuzziness to it. But, I mean, in terms of like the lighting and everything, like it was shot in Super 35, so it would have been a very grainy movie. But I always loved the photography. I loved the use of color and the lighting and everything. I mean, that's one of the things which really stands out to me.
See, there were certain sequences that I did think were great, that I thought really played well, and there were other ones that just, and I was left with such an impression of an uneven experience that I looked up, the behind the scenes stuff that's out there online, a couple of pages on it. And apparently there are like whole subplots cut from this. Yeah. Like there's a romantic subplot between Chow Yun-Fat and Mira Sorvino that is excised. There's barely a hint of it. There's a tiny hint because they have like, leading up to in certain moments, but they never, ever, like the closest you get is at the end when she gives like a knowing look to him after she saves him by hitting a guy with a truck sort of thing, you know?
And that was one of the things where, since it was his first movie, and I think this is probably common now too, but you don't hear about it as much. But back then, I mean, there's no way that a first-time director is going to get final cut on a movie, right? But, there were a number of sequences which were chopped out of the movie. I guess there was a lot of stuff with the antagonist and I think his son that was cut out. And they did release an extended, unrated version, later on down the line, which unfortunately is the only way you can get it on Blu-ray, where they added like 17 minutes of footage. And it's cool because you can see like a lot of those subplots and everything, but the way that they're stuck back into the movie is terrible. Like literally, like they had the movie and they just like stuck this in, and like the music cues don't line up, and like the editing is like really clunky, and there's some moments, just some sort of like flashy moments where it's just like, okay, they cut that out, not to save time or anything, but just because they watched it and were like, this is really bad, this doesn't work at all, so it's by no means like a director's cut. And I really do think that like the theatrical cut is probably at least, something that sort of resembles what he was working on, even though he said like, I really miss some of the stuff that was cut out. I really wish that it was stuck back in. But I don't think that he would approve of the extended cut as is, because it's so clunky. It's just, it's very, very awkward to watch.
But the thing is, that's my impression with the theatrical cut, is that it too is clunky. Like I was aware of, John Woo and that sort of rising influence coming across. I watched Hard Boiled, and there was some other film that I watched or whatever, and if anybody hasn't seen Hard Boiled, the main characters in that their names are Vodka and Tequila. And that was, I mean, because the Hong Kong action genre was just, it was all about those big set pieces. And my impression with Replacement Killers is that this is one of those things where they said, okay, let's take this hot thing, this hot property that's going on, and let's bring one of the iconic actors of it, Chow Yun-Fat, over. But then somebody with American cultural sensibilities makes the movie, and so it doesn't mesh as well. And what's interesting is, like, almost as a thought experiment, now I want to go back and get the John Woo American movies from that era and see, like, I think there's almost an interesting thought experiment that can happen. Not thought experiment, but like sociological sort of thing where you can sit down and you can say, okay, this is what went wrong when somebody from the Hong Kong industry came over and tried to make a movie in America, and this is what went wrong when somebody in America tried to make a Hong Kong type of movie, and where are the similarities and what misfired and where are the differences, sort of thing.
Yeah, I mean, I think, I don't know, I really like, the way that this movie is photographed and everything, but I mean, I definitely do think that Fuqua was like, okay, I need to try to make a John Woo movie, because that's what people are expecting. And you do see like a lot of those elements, with the, two guns, or like people, pointing their guns at each other as they're both empty, and then needing to reload and all that stuff. And it's, I think it's really interesting kind of like tracking his career and seeing how his style changes. I mean, his very next movie after this was Bait with Jamie Foxx, which I was there opening day, first show. I couldn't wait. I'm like, this is going to be amazing. And it's not a tremendously good movie. It's kind of okay. But it is sort of like an action comedy. And it's kind of, there's like certain scenes, there's certain elements and shots and everything which you can kind of see flow through all of his movies, from this to Bait to Training Day to Tears of the Sun. But there's other things that definitely change. And I think that he didn't really find his voice until Training Day. Like, Training Day is sort of like pure, unfiltered Fuqua. And, as much as I love Replacement Killers, as much as I kind of, am a champion of this movie, and it's my favorite in a sense, I think, because, I feel that sort of like sense of like discovery. And that's one of the reasons why I think Fuqua is one of my absolute favorite all-time filmmakers, is because I was like, I saw that movie opening weekend and I'm like, this is my guy and I'm going to follow him. And it took me, years until I could see the next movie. But now, here we are 20 years later, and, every single one of his movies, I've seen the very first show on opening day. And, it's like Training Day, I think, is where he really came into his. I don't think that I'm, shocking anyone by saying this.
I have a question though. Like, given the troubled history, and they even brought in, I forget the name of the first producer they brought in to try to quiet things down because they were nervous about him losing control of the production, sort of thing, and that caused more problems. Deborah Hill comes in. It's a very different way of dealing with things than we're used to seeing now in the Disney era.
Yeah.
Where we are accustomed to seeing directors get fired for whatever reason. Everybody always thinks everybody's the great creative collaborator in the history of the world, but we just didn't get along, sort of thing. Mm-hmm. But like, it's fascinating to me because I think that in and of itself is would Fuqua, and am I mispronouncing? Is it Fuqua? Have I been mispronouncing it?
I'm not sure. I think it's Fuqua, but I've heard both.
Okay.
I don't know.
Well, Tony, as I like to call him, I wonder if in today's environment he gets the chance to move on. Like, he has this troubled production with Replacement Killers, and as much as I'm sitting here sort of like, well, this didn't work, that and I didn't like this, there were still elements of it where I saw what was coming and why I like him now. Like, I could see certain things where I was like, okay, when it clicked, I was like, I see it. I got it. I see where he's going to go. And I know, the benefits of hindsight, sort of thing. But does he get that chance now?
I don't know. I mean, the path is so different these days, right? I mean, I think like if he's, a hotshot music video director, just like he was back then. I don't necessarily know that they give him. I mean, back then it was all about that's where they found their talent. I mean, that's where all those guys came from, like Michael Bay. Everything. It was all commercials and music videos. That's Spike Jonze, David Fincher, like all those guys. That was sort of like the thing. Like, let's go to the and I mean that's really changed. And sort of like the thing that they would do is like, okay, let's give them this little action movie and see what happens, right? Whereas, like now, I don't know. I mean, I could be misreading this, but I get the impression that guys like that are just sort of like, it's like, well, let's give him some or they will raise money to make something on their own and essentially do like a little like micro budget movie, maybe an action movie, and take it around the festival circuit, have it get picked up by Netflix or something. And then, once that explodes, that leads to something more. So it's almost like they aren't dealing with the studio the first time out. And that's what we're seeing with like Gareth Edwards and everything. Like they make, the small indie movie, and then they get the big studio thing, and that's when it all collapses, or whatever.
Yeah, and the film is still taken away, and producers show up and recut everything and reshoot things and stuff like that. So,
Whereas I think the thing back then was like, this guy's a visionary. Let's give him a movie. And then, they let him do their thing or whatever, and then in the editing room, it's like, okay, let's just cut all this stuff out. And then what they release is sort of like a chopped up version of their original vision.
So you're saying that the intercession point is earlier in the process now?
Maybe. I don't know.
Maybe that's just a function of the production timeline because you're shooting digitally, and so your dailies are coming around faster, and so you're seeing the finished product, and so you're seeing the things being edited in real time.
That's true.
And so it's giving them an earlier entry point to take over the process if they don't like what's happening. So okay, but if he's volatile enough, as he was then, to fight the first producer that comes in to try to fix the situation, and then to bring in a second one, like I don't know. I think nowadays Ron Howard comes in and reshoots Replacement Killers for him. So, that's what's likely to happen. One thing that I think is absolutely fascinating about it is that Chow Yun-Fat did not have a mastery of the English language when he shot this film, and he spoke Cantonese and a little Mandarin, and Mira Sorvino apparently is fluent in Mandarin.
Oh, really?
And she would translate for him so that, like the direction and stuff like that, she could make it, more fluid for him. Which I think is really cool because Tarantino's the one that told her, you got to work with him. You got to work with him. This is Chow Yun-Fat. And of course it's Tarantino that knows who he is.
Oh yeah. And I mean, that's like, I think almost all of his dialogue was redubbed in post-production, because like on those new added sequences where they had cut them out so early that they weren't doing like ADR for his dialogue or whatever, you can definitely tell, like they're using like the on-set dialogue. You can definitely tell that he's he doesn't speak English, I mean, or he doesn't speak much English at all, and that is something which was all kind of like refined in post-production. Because I mean, this was his very first American movie, and it's crazy to see how and it's weird because like it was almost like he was sort of like he was so known for these like amazing action movies over in Hong Kong that when he came here, it was almost like, well, he's an actor, but his movies are going to be like almost like Jackie Chan, like he has that sort of like. Or anyway, I mean, or Arnold Schwarzenegger or anybody, where it's like there's a certain type of action and we can expect that. And then when he did his next movie, The Corruptor, which came out, like later on that year, I think, I was like, I have to go to this on opening day too, because this could be even better. It looks like it's going to be even better. And it wasn't. It was a lot worse. But but he certainly found his place in American cinema as well. You know, I mean, with Anna and the King, and then later on with the Pirates of the Caribbean and everything like that.
Yeah,
like he's So,
well, so at the end of the day, you still recommend Replacement Killers for everybody, but with the caveat that you understand you're looking through the filter of an emotional attachment that maybe not everybody has.
Well, yeah, but I mean, like, before I would be like, this is a masterpiece, and now I'm like, this movie is excellent, So it's not, I mean, yes, my opinion of it may be, altered a little bit through, history or whatever, nostalgia or whatever, but I still think that it's an amazing movie. I mean, at the time, I was like really going back and forth, and I think I ended up putting it at number 1 on my top 10 list for 1998. And now I wouldn't do that. I'd put The Big Lebowski at number 1 for sure. But Replacement Killers would definitely be top 5 for sure. I mean, Out of Sight, number 2. Replacement Killers, off the top of my head, I think would be number 3.
Well, I can't agree, but I can also understand. I can understand. This is one of those films where I think that it can break either way easily. And again, like, as much as I'm not, as enamored of it, I can easily point to several scenes where I'm like, that is the magic coming through. Oh, that's the magic coming through. So I definitely think it's worth a watch, but I would definitely put the caveat not to expect, greatness. Just, expect a good movie. It's enjoyable enough to do, and also short enough that if you don't like it, it's not going to take a lot out of your time to see it. So, but if people want to talk to you about your top 10 list of 1998 and your stance on Replacement Killers, Mike, where can they find you online?
Well, you can find me on Twitter at Mumbles3K, and you can also find me on you could find me on Letterboxd at Mumbles3K, where I have my historical lists from 1998. If you look over there, and you can find me on Trek.fm doing a show called The Edge, and another show on Trek.fm called Stage 9 with you.
Yes, we do Stage 9 over on Trek FM. I also co-host Words with Nerds with my pal Craig, and also right here I co-host Aggressive Negotiations with Matthew Rushing. And if you want to look me up online, I am Kessel Junkie, unless you don't like what I'm saying, and then I'm no one. So with all of that said, even though it's been delayed yet another week, we promise you that next week you will be getting a Lifetime Horror Fans hot take first reaction to the Oscar-nominated best film, Get Out.
Join the revolution. Join the Nerd Party.